they have to make up all this nonsense about Russians are giving their soldiers Viagra to rape little old Ukrainian women, and all these, Russians are raping and children and babies. And where does this come from? Even now, there's the so-called Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine, this UN body. And if you go into kind of the fine print here, it says that it relies primarily on firsthand information and on state actors, including one of the women who testified before this body is a woman named Lyudmila Denisova. She is the former Ukrainian ombudswoman, Ukrainian human rights commissioner, who was fired. She is now disgraced because she admitted exaggerating these stories. And it turned out that most of them came from a hotline that was staffed by her daughter. And it turned out that her daughter told the prosecutor's office that she had received 1,040 calls, and 450 of them concerned the rape of children. And an official log subsequently showed only 92 calls were made. This is not Russian. This is not a Russian source, right? This is like a fact-check Western-based source. And they said the main problem with the former Human Rights Commissioner's hotline is, however, that the public does not know whether people have actually reported the cases in question. Maybe people really told these stories, maybe not. The problem is we don't know. But instead, the UN is passing all this off as fact.
Yeah, and here we have Gadhafi supplies troops with Viagra to encourage mass rape. This article is more than 11 years old because this was the fraud that poured out of the Libyan opposition into the mouth of Susan Rice, then UN ambassador for the Obama administration, to encourage regime change that ultimately turned Libya into a disastrous failed state and an ISIS haven. So we've seen this lie before. Alex, actually, we got an article going up very shortly by you about this lie. I don't know if you have anything to add about the Ukrainian disinformation campaign, which has been eagerly assisted by U.S. media.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're one of the groups in the Ukrainian government that's working with the United Nations, this organization that was headed by, I don't know how Wyatt said her name, but what's her last name? Denisova or something. Yeah. So she actually set up two hotlines. One was in the official capacity of her office, and the other one was with her daughter. And when journalists tried to substantiate some of these stories that were being fed to them through this hotline, for example, a 4-month-old baby being raped with a teaspoon, they weren't able to do so. And so she resigned. Well, she was voted out in a no confidence vote in total disgrace. She was in fact working with the UN. And let's point out really quick that the United Nations Office for the High Commissioner for Human Rights, of the 10 foreign governments that fund it, all of them except for Switzerland have been giving weapons to Ukraine. So, I mean, it's hardly an impartial actor in my view. I mean, you have to understand that, like any organization that claims independence, but it's funded, 9 of its 10 funders are like proxy war belligerents. You can hardly, take that credibility on its face when they call themselves independent. So, I think those things are worth pointing out. The stories that have come actually, I wish we could play the clip now, but I actually haven't sent it to you, Max. But the UN envoy who pushed this Viagra claim, she first pushed it back in, I think, June. It was in an interview with a U.S. government, the foundation, the Institute for Peace, it's U.S. government, like think tank kind of thing.
It's a State Department cutout right across the street from the State Department.
Right. Yeah. So she testified there, and she was asked a question about reporting and verification. And basically everything that she says in the course of 5 minutes of responding to this question, this is when she first brought up the Viagra claim, casts doubt on the veracity of anything she says. She undermines herself. She talks about how a lot of the tips that were coming in through the hotlines are anonymous, how the UN has a higher threshold for verification than the offices in Ukraine, and so they're working with those offices to try to establish credibility on cases. So it's not, you don't see this kind of human rights work going on in Donbass. You don't have Amnesty International, really doing reports, or Human Rights Watch or anything like that. It's the NGO industrial complex tied with the UN, giving support to the NATO proxy war by only damning one side, and oftentimes those it's just false what they're putting out.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Amnesty International begrudgingly acknowledge that Ukrainian forces were using civilians as collateral, that the Azov battalion was firing on civilian corridors, people trying to escape Mariupol, going towards the Russian side because they needed them as collateral. And they came under attack from who? Their own bureau inside Kiev, which is explicitly using this human rights NGO, the supposed human rights NGO, as it's used typically around the world, as just a vehicle for advancing NATO's agenda and what effectively would be regime change in Russia if they can achieve total victory. And Amnesty International apologized for its own report. So they're not going to go any further and document, Wyatt, what you've been seeing in Donetsk. There are human rights organizations there, but they're not only ignored, they themselves come under attack. We've seen relief workers killed and, completely ignored in Western media. It's like the whole area isn't there. There are no humans there on the other side of the contact line. And, I wanted to ask you both, just because you are, doing this reporting that is considered essentially forbidden in U.S. media. Wyatt, you've been branded with the mark of the beast on your Twitter account. And Alex, you did your first part of your NAFO piece. But, what is the response, Alex? You've been like swarmed with cartoon dogs. And I mean, it seems like they're kind of proving your point. Like all they do, we wrote in the intro of the piece, or you wrote in the intro of the piece. I just consider everything if it's at the Grayzone, but
fair enough.
You wrote that, like, if you criticize NAFO, you will immediately be accused by hundreds of cartoon dogs of being paid by and or performing fellatio on Vladimir Putin. And that's precisely what happened to you. And Wyatt, what kind of reaction are you getting?
Yeah, well, I mass block all of these things because it's a tool of information warfare, and they are trying to report me. They're trying to take me down from the website. So I have run through just like a block list that just goes after every single person that these people follow, because they move as a little pack of NATO lapdogs. So I just, mass block them so that they're not able to swarm me and just like drown my phone in like vibrations and notifications all day. But some people don't like blocking people. At this point, to me, it's like, it's not a matter of free speech, because you're trying to stop me from having free speech. The whole point of them existing is to shut down free speech. I don't really want to play their game, and I'm not interested in being on the receiving end of their harassment, their death threats. They say just like all types of horrific stuff, in the comments of the, the video about my hotel being struck. It was just all these people saying, oh, you should have gotten there faster. Oh, I wish. And even stuff about like, I can't wait till your body is like a mangled corpse lying in the road, stuff like